Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most trusted voice in true crime. I hope wherever you are, you're doing well, coping with the truly extraordinary situations we're dealing with worldwide. The whole true crime analysis provides some kind of sense of continuity in terms of what went on before. And we do kind of also wonder what is going to happen in high-profile true crime going forward. You know, in terms of the coronavirus, there are a couple of cases that are pending, Robert Durst, Letitia Stores, and so on. So we expect life to go on, but also for justice to go on in terms of true crime. In any event, in terms of this episode, we're going to be looking at something that I think has been overlooked by most people in terms of the Chris Watts case. There's still, I think, a large number of people, if not the majority, who believe that the children, or at least one child, was alive when Chris Watts was parked on the driveway and when he left in that sort of infamous CCTV footage from the neighbor Nathaniel Gymnastich. So we're going to look at that, and then we're also I'm just going to talk to you very briefly about the crime scene. Another creator brought up the topic that the crime scene the Watts home wasn't a crime scene for very long. And I think the implication there is that the case wasn't very well investigated, that it needs to be reopened and so on. So I'm going to deal with that. Before we get there, I want to thank the 1,500 or so subscribers. I think many of you are from Britain who've sort of paid attention to my analysis on the Madeleine McCann case. I've just written another book on that, Deeper into Darkness. So thank you guys for subscribing. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe, like, share, leave a comment, and let's get started. So some people comment on the fact that I referred to myself as the most trusted voice in true crime. I think what differentiates True Crime Rocket Science from many of the other channels out there is I won't make unsubstantiated claims about cases. In fact, I don't know of too many other channels that show as many newspaper reports or photos related to actual evidence or whatever. It is important to do that, and that is exactly how court cases are prosecuted. It is referring to written statements. It's referring to documents. It's not just waffle, right? So in that respect, I'm going to refer you to page 87 of the discovery documents, and it's referring to Saturday, August 18th in the investigation in 2018. So you can go and have a look at that if you want to. It refers to, in the second paragraph, Christopher Watts's work truck that was parked just northeast in front of the house on the north side of the street facing west. It refers to one of the dogs that were taken to the work truck, and Jane, that's the dog handler, who advised that the dog showed interest in the truck. So Officer Jane is using a cadaver dog, and Jane said that the dog showed interest in the truck, right? And this is the part that I think is really interesting. Jane stated the dog did not alert for any human remains inside the vehicle. Now, I think there needs to be some clarification, because I think people have not been very clear. I'm talking about some other creators and commentators in terms of the training that the certain dogs receive. Now, you can go to page 85 of the discovery documents. When I say page 85, I mean page 85 that the document itself refers to. This would actually be, I think, page 40 in the PDF. So I just think it's ridiculous to refer to the PDF page when the discovery is giving their own pagination. So anyway, it's page 85 of the discovery documents. It's page 40 of the 1960 page PDF affidavit. Just incidentally, if you compare the Watts discovery, which seems like it's a lot, 1960 pages, to the Stork discovery, Letitia Stork discoveries around about 20,000 pages. So there's actually not although it feels like we've been given a lot, it's not really that much. Bear in mind there were around 60 people involved in the investigation, from the CBI, FBI, numerous police precincts, and so on. In any event, on the top of page 85, it refers to that there'd been an indication from a cadaver dog that a struggle or argument may have ensued. So the cadaver dog found something, and then Jeff Hibbert entered the home, and his dog showed interest in an unmade bed, right? It's important to emphasize here that Hibbert's dog is a track dog, and the track dog is looking for something besides what the cadaver dog is looking for, right? It's also important to stress that the garage showed no indications. Now, this is important for a couple of reasons. Number one, I think everyone will agree that when Shanann left the house that morning, she was no longer alive. So Shanann was transported, carried out of the house. I must be careful how I put this. She was transported into the truck. And that doesn't necessarily mean that she was transported on the driveway, that she was dragged on a sheet on the driveway or carried in plain sight. Chris Watts reversed his truck so that the edge was virtually inside the garage, right? I don't know how many people in the world would want to carry dead bodies out onto their driveway and into a truck when there's another way of doing it. In other words, what I'm saying is anybody carrying a dead body that could be seen by the public would immediately be found guilty. So it's a huge risk doing that. So you've also got to ask, well, why did Chris Watts pull the truck up to the garage? Why did he pull it up so far? Remember, he later pulled it sort of further forward, so it was behind the trees. But the original question remains, why did he back it up so far? He didn't just back it up. He backed it up so that the rear end of it was kind of poking slightly into the driveway, into the garage. Now, wouldn't it make sense to try to load, if there was a body, and there was, load that directly from the house into the truck without having to go outside or without being visible outside? Bear in mind, there wasn't just one camera that was one had to worry about here. There were two. There was the camera on the Trinastich side, but there was also the doorbell camera. So Watts had to make sure he never got into the line of sight of that camera as well. Now, it could be that he simply deactivated that camera by turning off the router, but it could also be that he was trying to be extra careful. One thing we don't seem to see is any indication that that camera showed Watts' truck leaving that morning. I'm talking about from the doorbell camera. So the question is, why did the dogs not show any alerts in the garage? if there was one body that was being transported through the garage to the truck, wherever it was parked, why didn't the dog show any alerts in the garage? And I think it's easy to sort of just raise a question mark and say that cadaver dogs didn't really know what was going on. I don't think that's the case. I don't think it's a case that the cadaver dog's ability to smell was defective. I think it's something else. So now we go to this point where Jane states that the dog did not alert for any human remains inside the vehicle. Bear in mind, she's searching with a cadaver dog. It's kind of a brown animal, and I think it's a retriever. And Jane, according to this statement, Jane gets access to the inside of the vehicle, and she says the dog didn't alert for human remains inside the vehicle. That's impossible because we know Shanann was deceased at that point. In all the versions we've gotten so far from Chris Watts, there's a version where Shanann was deceased and the children were deceased. There's a version where Shanann was deceased and that both children were alive. And then there's also a version where Shanann was deceased and one of the children was deceased at a certain point, and then later the other. In any event, we're talking about Shanann not leaving any cadaver traces in the truck. And then you say, how's that possible? I don't think that is possible if you place in the truck in a sheet. And we know she was placed in a fitted sheet, and we know that that sheet was transported to the well site, and we know the sheet was recovered there, and that we know that it had cadaver traces on it there. So the question is, how was Shanann's cadaver transported that it didn't leave any traces inside the vehicle? And I think the answer, there are two ways of establishing the answer. The first is that Shanann was possibly placed in a container inside, so she was wrapped in a fitted sheet and then placed in a container. By container I mean one of those plastic totes that are in the basement. The basement is just full of those totes. Another possibility is that there was also black plastic bags, which we know there were, and that provided further sort of sequestration of evidence. But what I'm kind of contending is that the way Shanann was placed in the truck was in a way that she wouldn't leave any cadaver traces. And that is a remarkable achievement given how easy it is to leave cadaver traces. But bear in mind, if you have it in a sealed container, almost like a coffin, but in this case a plastic container, that is then going to your odds of doing that are of sequestrating these odors and chemicals and traces are going to be much greater. Now, I've always believed that was how he transported the children. I've never considered that may have been how he transported Shanann, and this seems to bear that out. That not only that Shanann, but not only the children, Shanann was also likely transported in one of these totes. Now, in Chris Watts' statement, I'm not going to provide a source for that here. I have previously, but Chris Watts does refer to loading containers in his statement to the FBI. I have established that previously. Also, we know that there were totes in the in the basement. So that I think would account for that. The other thing is, when you look at photos of the rear seat of the work truck, it's got an incredible amount of space. There would definitely be space to put one person in a kind of a fetal position and then two crates with children inside. Now, I know what some people will argue is they will say something about rigor mortis. How are you going to... And I think people have this perception that rigor mortis is almost like when a person dies, they become like a stick insect. And if you were to try to move their body, you'd break off pieces of the stick. All rigor mortis is it's a stiffening of the body. It doesn't mean you can't. It's almost like a doll. It doesn't mean you can't manipulate the body after death. And although there's a stiffening, there's also a period sometimes later on where the stiffening dissipates. Also, rigor mortis with a smaller cadaver is less. My counter argument to the whole rigor mortis argument is the longer the children had been deceased, the more moisture they would have lost, and the cadavers would have actually reduced slightly in size, which would have helped them. That stiffness would actually helped put them through those narrow openings, especially if they had some kind of lubricant like Vaseline placed on them. So I don't really, people who make the argument about rigor mortis, I don't agree with that at all. The other part that I want to refer to is in the statement, it refers to the dog didn't alert for human remains inside the vehicle, but the dog did catch the scent of one of the three missing parties. Now, why is it just one of them? I mean, if you think about it, when Chris Watts drove with his work truck, he never had Shanann in the work truck. He never had prior to the crime. He never had the children in the work truck. So why is there scent in the work truck? Now, it's unfortunate that the actual missing party isn't identified. I have a feeling that it was actually Shanann's scent that was what they picked up. And that could be Shanann's scent from her previously approaching the work truck, for example, before she went to Arizona. I'm not saying getting into it, but just previously approaching it. It could also be Shanann walking off the driveway, right, the day that she arrived. It could simply be that. And then the fact that the work truck kind of parked in a similar area. You might have such a small amount of odor that the dog is kind of conflating the two, something like that. I know what a lot of people will think in contrast to that. They'll be thinking, oh, I know that scent it was Bella running up the driveway. But that's not right either. If you go to page 254 of the discovery documents, that's 209 of the PDF, right at the bottom, during the track I did not locate any scent trails leading away from the house. So not one of the three victims, Bella, Cece or Shanann, walked out of the house that morning. Now, it is true that there was rain, and rain could have interfered with the scent. If you go to page 982 of the discovery, it refers to a heavy rainfall and wind, which was strong enough to knock over several garbage cans and blow them and wash them down to the south curb line of Saratoga Trail. So that was a heavy shower of rain. And this obviously occurred on the driveway as well of the Watts residence. It was very, I think, fortuitous for Chris Watts, and unfortunate for us trying to figure out some of the intricacies of the case. It would be very good for those who are following Detective Baumhover's blog, maybe ask him who did that scent trail belong to that was identified, the one of the three. In any event, one would think even with a shower of rain, something like cadaver traces should have been recoverable, or the dog should have scented it, first of all inside the vehicle, and then second of all um, in the garage, right, and in the residence. I remember when I was researching my book on the case, part of the Two-Face series, I was wondering whether Watts had washed his vehicle at any point, and it seems as if he got that benefit through Mother Nature, not only onto his vehicle but also the driveway. So the final thing I want to refer to is from Coder's interrogation of Chris Watts. I don't think Chris Watts knew he was being interrogated. I think he just thought he was having a conversation. And this is from page 1258 of the Discovery, or 1141 of the PDF. And what's quite interesting is in line 4697, Coder refers to, he says, "I'm going to help organize the search at your house tonight." And Watts just says, "Okay." Bear in mind, Watts knows he's talking to the FBI. He knows this is now, the dogs have already been in there and they're going to go back. And obviously Watts had done something, so this isn't very good news. Coder says, "I still want to do that." Watts says, "I was just going to go to my friend's house." And it almost sounds as though Watts is kind of saying, I wasn't running away, or something like, maybe I'll search with you if you like. And he says, "and get out of your way." And then Watts, still referring to his friends, the Thayers, says, "hopefully they're still awake." Coder says, "I can't tell you that we have to do it, okay?" I think this is a reference to the search. In any event, this is what I want to draw your attention to. Watts answers, and he's stuttering. He says, if like you said, I mean, it rained tonight." And Coder answers, "Yeah." And Watts says, "Like hard, like it blew 4 trash cans in my yard." And Coder says, let's get on it, right? In other words, Watts is kind of saying, "Cheapest, maybe because of the weather you should wait in terms of searching." And Coder is saying, no, we're gonna do the search regardless, right? So I'm just saying there wasn't a weather event that may have actually messed up the evidence in terms of the cadaver dogs. It wasn't just a little bit of rain. It seemed like it was a lot of rain and a lot of wind. Okay, and so that's it. I'm going to do a follow-up episode on this, and it's dealing with something another creator did about the crime scene. And I think he was trying to make the point that the Watts home wasn't a crime scene for very long, and thus the police investigation was botched, and thus the case should be reopened, and there's so much we don't know, and blah, 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 blah. I don't agree with that, but I'm going to take you through the facts based on the discovery of when the Watts home, when 2825 Saratoga Trail was officially, or certainly what we can extrapolate from the discovery, no longer a crime scene. For those that are following this episode but who are also interested in the Madeleine McCann case, I'm going to be doing a follow-up episode on the Cadaver Trail that was reported in a British publication that alleged that there was a mile-long cadaver trail from the Ocean Club Hotel to the beach. And then I'm also going to do a episode on the McCann's defense, in inverted commas, where they referred to case law, an American case called the Zapata case. Eugene Zapata, from a long ago case from 1976, and we're gonna deal with that in an episode, just dealing with the effectiveness / question mark of cadaver dogs, and how the McCanns try to, and one could argue, succeeded in raising doubt about the evidence of cadaver dogs. Okay, so that's all from me for now. I want to encourage those of you who aren't on Patreon yet. There's a lot of content there. I update it daily, often multiple times daily. There's a lot of discussion, a nice group of people. At the moment, there are 295 videos on my Patreon channel, a number of polls, 145 links, and almost 520 images. There are also 26 writings. I try very hard to respond to pretty much every comment that is made or questions that are asked. There are around about 200 patrons on the channel, so you can get quite a lot of content on a continuous basis for just $1 a month. So consider subscribing to that. But in the meantime, wherever you are in the world, stay safe, stay healthy, make sure you're getting enough sleep and eating well. And I'll see you guys next time.